Would you like to make compost for your garden but you don't have the space or the time or patience to even make a good compost? Well, there is a way to get it in far less time. 4 to 6 weeks is all it takes to make a usable compost. And you can do it in very little space. It's called Bokashi Composting. Bokashi is a Japanese word meaning fermented organic matter. This method is a little bit different than other forms of composting. Traditional composting is a mixture of green materials that are rich in nitrogen and a mixture of brown materials that are rich in carbon, along with air and water. The greens and browns would go into a big pile that you would turn on a regular basis. This method of composting normally takes about a year before you can get usable compost. This is an aerobic method. There are also large drums that you can get for your backyard that you turn your compost on a regular basis, but that also takes a while to get usable compost. Another form of composting is called vermicomposting, and that uses worms to break down organic matter. I'll be using vermicomposting soon, so be on the lookout for that content. There are pros and cons to each of these methods. Traditional composting takes a lot of labor and time. With vermicomposting, you have to make sure you keep the worms in good health. Now back to the Bokashi method. First thing you're going to need to get started is some Bokashi bran. Bokashi bran can be made out of wheat bran, rice bran, or spent barley grains that have been inoculated with molasses and effective microorganisms, or EM. This is what is going to essentially ferment your food scraps and help break them down. The second thing you need is either 1 or 2 buckets. The way this method works is by layering the Bokashi bran that's been inoculated with effective microorganisms and food scraps like fruits and veggies, and unlike traditional composting, you can even add meats, cheeses, citrus, small bones, and even leftovers into a bucket. Once the bucket is full, you'll leave it for 2 weeks to ferment. After that, it can be dug into your garden or added to your traditional compost pile. Unlike a traditional compost pile, which is an aerobic process that requires oxygen, Bokashi is an anaerobic process, which requires no oxygen. In fact, you want to limit the amount of oxygen as much as possible. From the time you start your Bokashi bucket until you have usable soil is less than a month. I have this Bokashi bucket from Terraganics. It's a nice system and it's very aesthetically pleasing to look at. I'll have this one linked in the description if you'd like to buy one. For those of you who like DIYs and want to make one yourself, I'm going to show you how quickly and easily it can be done. Before we get started with the build, I want to show you what the Terraganics system looks like. Here's the lid. It just sits on there loosely, and then inside, this is where you push all the air out every time you load it with food. And then this is the food scraps with the Bokashi on the top of it. And then each time you'll put food in, then layer it with the Bokashi, and then you'll push all the air out. And it doesn't really smell like it smells kind of like, I mean, if you know what kombucha smells like or something fermenting, it smells just the same as that. It's not a bad smell at all. And then underneath where the food is, there's a bunch of holes down there, and as it ferments, it releases the juice, and you can take this Bokashi juice and dilute it down 1 to 100 and water your plants with it. I'm going to show you what that looks like. You want to lean it back a little bit. Oh my gosh. Oh wow, I didn't know there was that much in there. It smells like beer. It does. It smells like something fermented. It kind of smells like apple cider vinegar. For this method, you'll need 2 buckets and a drill to drill holes in the bottom of 1 bucket. You'll also need a lid, which can be one of these regular ones that come with it, or one of these Gamma Seal lids that make it airtight. And then this contraption is kind of like the one for the Terraganics. Once you put the food in, you're going to want to push it down to make sure all the air is out. If you don't have one of these, you can use a piece of cardboard. You just want to make sure the food has no air pockets in it. So you're going to have to push it down like maybe with a potato masher or something like that. This is called an airscape, and once you have the food in, you'll just push this down, and I'll have it linked in the description. You just want to drill several holes into the bottom of the bucket. Drilling holes in the bottom is going to allow all the liquid from the bokashi fermentation to drip down into the second bucket. Now I'm going to put the bucket with the holes down into the bucket without holes. Okay, I don't get it. I can't get it on. Okay, I have my food scraps, and what we normally do is we have a small container sitting by the sink, so when I chop up fruits or vegetables, I can put it in there and empty it into our bin at the end of the day. Or if you want to save it for a longer period of time, like this one, I knew I was going to be doing this, so I just put it in the refrigerator in a bag. One thing you need to make sure of is do not put anything in here that has mold on it, because that mold will compete with the microorganisms in the bokashi and it'll ruin it. Each time you put food in here, only put 1 to 2 inches worth of food in there. And then you're going to layer it with a scoop of bokashi. And then push it down. So now I have a couple of inches, and then the Bokashi bran, and I'm going to put some more food in there, and then put some more Bokashi bran on top of that. And remember, you can put anything in here basically except for liquids and moldy food. Just make sure it's cut up into some pretty small pieces. And now we're going to take our lid and push out as much air as we possibly can. And then after that, we're just going to put the lid on and seal it up. So when you're ready to add your food scraps, you'll just want to take your lid off, pull out your plunger thing, and add your food scraps, and then add more Bokashi bran, and then push all the air out again, seal it back up. Once your food gets to the top, seal it back up and let it sit for 2 weeks to ferment some more. And then after that, you can put it in your garden or put it in your compost pile. But wherever you put it in your garden, make sure it's covered and let it sit for another 2 weeks to finish fermenting, and then you can use that in your garden. So if this is something that you're thinking about doing, you might want to have 2 or 3 sets of buckets in your rotation. So don't forget every few days to lift up the top bucket and to drain the bokashi liquid into a jar, and then take 1 tablespoon diluted to 1 gallon of water, and then water your plants with it. It's very nutritious for your plants. Make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments if you're going to be trying Bokashi composting.